Hello and welcome to the secrettowriting.com's Expanding College Opportunity Speaker Series. I'm Stan Lemons and I'll be your host for today. The Expanding College Opportunity Speaker Series is a wonderful opportunity to provide information to help families access higher education. And that's quite frankly our mission, our mantra, and that's what we aim to do here at the secrettowriting.com. But today we have the honor and privilege to have a very special guest who will lead us in a conversation titled How to Manage Stress and Anxiety During the School Year, a critical conversation for both students and parents. Today's featured guest is Mrs. MRS period, Mrs. Janine Lemons, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have her with us today. So before we get started, let me say that, I want to thank you really for sending in your questions. They're very helpful, and it helps us to be able to share the information that ultimately, or as we hope, will help you. And so with that being said, I don't want to take up too much time because I want to give Janine all the time that she wants and needs, all within the hour that we have together today. Let me just first off share a little bit of information about, or background information about Janine. She is a native of New Jersey. However, she also spent most of her growing years in North Carolina. She's a graduate of Bennett College, and later she earned her master's degree from Clark Atlanta University. Janine has been a licensed bilingual professional therapist for just about 20 years now. So that's no small feat, I might add. When I asked her about her many accomplishments, one that seems to really stand out is her service as a Peace Corps volunteer, where she worked in Esmeraldas, Ecuador. So it is really a pleasure and an honor to have her participate in our in the secrettowriting.com's Expanding College Opportunity Speaker Series. So buckle up, sit back, and let's all put on our listening ears, and I will turn it over to Janine, and what she has a presentation that she's gonna share, but if you want to have any opening words, Janine, and then you can click over and share your presentation, and then we'll just dive ahead.
Just to thank you. I really appreciate you giving me this platform to be able to speak about stress and anxiety management for parents and teenagers. So thank you very much to secrettowriting.com.
You're very welcome. We thank you.
So I will jump right into my presentation. All right. So let's see here. I'll make this a little bit larger here. All right. All right. Secrettowriting.com. Does everything look okay?
I think you need to, on your top left, turn off on the view. If you click on that, that'll get rid of the thumbnails on the left.
Okay, got it. All right.
There you go.
Okay.
I think you're good to go.
All right, thank you very much. So let's get started. As Stan mentioned, I've been a licensed professional counselor for almost 18 years now, and just enjoyed, every year of this. I feel like this is my life's passion, and delivering this presentation allows me to provide some service to my community, especially people who don't have access to mental health resources. And so let's get started here talking about ways to manage stress and anxiety, especially during the school year, which brings more stressors. So who are we? We are Theralum. So Theralum is a company that I co-founded, and I'm also the clinical director, and we provide counseling services. You'll see a little bit more about that ahead in the presentation. So tonight, we will talk about what is anxiety? What is stress? What is fueling the youth mental health crisis? Coping skills for anxiety and stress management, and when to seek help. So who is Theralum, the company that I've co-founded? We are mental health counselors providing counseling services in 2 languages, Spanish and English, working with individuals to provide individual therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, treating adults, teens, and children, providing counseling services ranging from treatment for anxiety, behavioral issues, depression, parenting, stress, and definitely trauma. We do accept insurance and also private pay clients. So let's get started with what is anxiety. So, anxiety, by the Wayne State School of Social Work definition, is a feeling of fear in response to a perceived threat. And usually, anxiety is accompanied by thoughts or beliefs that a situation is outside of our resources. And so, anxiety is our body is actually working. When we feel anxious, our anxiety is that our brain's response to there's a threat, there's some outside threat, coming towards you, or there's an internal threat in terms of your thoughts, negative thoughts that you're thinking about something that's happening. And so here in the second portion of my slide, I've written, don't ask me about my anxiety, ask my brain. And so what does the brain have to do with anxiety? Well, a lot. So in the brain, there's a chemical called GABA. And GABA plays a critical role in managing anxiety, stress, and depression. As a matter of fact, low levels of GABA, according to the Cleveland Clinic, are linked to anxiety disorders. So people want to know, well, how can I increase my GABA? I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety. And so that can be done through things like exercise, yoga, meditation, eating healthy whole foods. So we will talk more about coping skills in this presentation, but it's really important to have a routine. So a lot of times we see an increase in anxiety when maybe we're not taking very good care of ourselves. Maybe our stress has become overwhelming. Maybe we're not seeking support. And so getting a routine in place for that. And we'll talk more about that ahead in the presentation. So we know that the brain is always trying to provide balance for the body. It's always looking to provide us what we need. And so we also have to help our brain, right? Help our brain with exercise, help our brain with having social support, right? Help our brain with eating healthy foods. All right, let's keep going here. So let's talk about some historical events that have contributed to anxiety in the last 4 years. We are in the aftermath of the pandemic, which is now endemic. And a lot of people are experiencing anxiety, or were experiencing anxiety throughout the pandemic years, right? People are asking themselves, did my anxiety just start out of nowhere? I feel more nervous than I've ever felt, I'm worrying more. I'm having trouble sleeping at night. And so let's just take a look back at the last 4 years, things that have contributed to a collective anxiety, like in terms of the world's anxiety. So we had the COVID-19 pandemic. And during the pandemic, more than 200,000 children lost a parent or primary caregiver to COVID-19. So there's anxiety there from that, and there's also grief. Grief, mourning, missing that parent. And in many cases, children and families weren't even allowed to grieve properly. They weren't allowed to mourn they had to delay funeral services, right? Do you remember that? Also, in 2020 alone, there was an estimated $22 billion assessed in costs from weather and climate events. We're seeing, more hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, droughts, just severe weather crisis. I will say myself, I'm a survivor of Hurricane Beryl. That was a recent hurricane that we went through over the summer, and it was frightening. It was definitely frightening. I will tell you, I must have said the Lord's Prayer about 25 times in that night alone. It was just unbelievable, and so there's anxiety. That was anxiety that I was experiencing. Worry, excessive worry all night, and just seeing the aftermath of the damage all across our neighborhood and our city. It's incredible, in our county. So that definitely can contribute to anxiety. And I'm just looking here at my city, but through watching the news, I can see these global weather events daily, just watching the news. And so that does have an impact. Also, gun violence events. I would be remiss if I, didn't talk about that, because we're seeing that so often. Children have to go through drills, safety drills. That's something that I did not experience, as a child, having to go through a safety drill for gun violence, to be prepared for that. And so that's anxiety there, that a lot of times that children and parents are experiencing, just thinking about, am I sending my child to a safe place when I send them to school? Something that years ago, 20 years ago, there was no worry there, right? Also, a youth mental health crisis. There's a youth mental health crisis, and that mental health crisis, folks, it started about 10 years before the pandemic, where there were little to no resources available for youth. And I'm going to share some information to you directly from therapists that are working in our front lines and seeing the mental health crisis and talking about the underlying reasons of the crisis. Also, racial trauma. I remember, as many of you all do, being at home and seeing the murders of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Tyree Nichols, just to name a few, and the anxiety that I experienced thinking about, how is this affecting me? How could this affect my family? How is it affecting their families? Tremendous anxiety there. What are the types of anxiety? How can I identify if I have anxiety? I get that question a lot. And so there are types of anxiety. So there's generalized anxiety, which is an excessive amount of anxiety or worry in many areas of life. It can be excessive worry in your job, about your school responsibilities, your health, your finances, your daily matters like completing homework assignments or housework. So it's that anxiety in many areas of your life. Also, there's panic disorder. And this is an extreme anxious response where a person feels an overall sense of dread, an intense fear. And many times they have what's called a panic attack, where they may just freeze in that moment, feel like they can't move, just be completely immobilized. And I have definitely coached people through panic attacks and seen that firsthand. And I want you to know, if you do experience a panic attack, usually it's only going to last for a few minutes. And so, that's something that you can remind yourself so you can bring that anxiety down. We do self-talk with anxiety disorders in terms of what are you saying to yourself, when you're having that panic attack. Are you saying that, I'm unsafe and I don't know when is this going to stop? Or this is a panic attack. This is my body experiencing a panic attack. I'm going to be able to calm down. This is only going to last a few minutes. And we'll talk about some other things here ahead that you can do if that happens, or if you're just feeling that overwhelming anxiety. So other types of anxiety are phobias, which are intense fears. And those intense fears are way out of proportion to the actual threat. For example, being afraid that an elevator is going to break while you're on it, or a fear of public speaking, or you're a human and you're afraid of a small insect, insect that you could, easily kind of whisk away, right? Or afraid of an animal. An intense fear, though, of these things. And I want you to know that people can have multiple phobias, more than one. And the phobia can cause some impairment in your ability to function. So maybe you stay away from dogs, or maybe you always take the stairs because you're afraid to get on elevators. Or maybe you turn down public speaking opportunities, at your work. Other types of anxiety are social anxiety, separation anxiety, agoraphobia, substance medication induced anxiety, which is like a medication or some type of drug that is producing the anxiety symptoms, and selective mutism. I'll choose to just talk about social anxiety because I have treated that a lot, where people are afraid to go to large crowds. Or being in large crowds, or going to places like a grocery store, or a shopping center, or a festival where they will encounter large crowds. And historically, we see things that have affected that, things that have happened, people getting shot, in public places, people seeing that. And then now, I have some anxiety, I have some fear around doing that. I'm experiencing these physiological symptoms, like I'm sweating. My heart is having palpitations. My heart is beating really fast because I have the social anxiety that can happen, right? What are some of the symptoms of anxiety? Let's go through some of the common symptoms of anxiety. So excessive anxiety and worry occurring more days than not for at least 6 months about a number of events or activities such as work or school performance, feelings of restlessness, like you just want to be moving, doing something, always doing something, or feeling on edge, like you just, there's something I have to do, or I just have to get up and get moving. Difficulty concentrating, or your mind just going blank, is another symptom. Muscle tension. So a lot of times we can have negative thoughts and then additionally feel this tenseness in our body. Maybe we feel this neck pressure or neck ache, butterflies in our stomach, or just overall body tension. And so muscle tension definitely is an anxiety symptom. I've seen that quite often practicing as a therapist. Also, the disturbance is not attributable to a substance. So when you think about the anxiety you're experiencing, you want to make sure it's not like drug related or medication related, because there are medications and medical conditions and drugs that can definitely produce anxiety in the body. Okay. Difficult to stop or control the worrying. You are just worrying excessively all day, or just certain parts of the day. These anxieties are just starting to become this worrying is starting to become overwhelming for you. Easily fatigued, lots of tiredness, irritability, don't want people to say too much to you, or irritable if someone, is trying to talk with you. Not being able to sleep well, difficulty falling asleep. I've worked with many patients who told me that the anxiety comes most at night. And why does that happen? Why does the anxiety come most at night? Well, that's the time of the day that you're not distracted, right? That's the time of the day where you're just at home. It's just you and your thoughts. And anxiety, it's almost like the anxiety is just waiting, waiting in the wind, like now I'm here, now I have your attention. And so a lot of times that causes people to not be able to sleep or to wake up in the middle of the night. These anxiety symptoms can cause significant distress or impairment in social areas, occupational area like work areas, or other important areas of functioning. What is stress? What is stress? So stress can be defined as the physiological or psychological response to internal, external, or external stressors. So let me explain that. So stress can be defined as the body's response to stress or the mind's response to stress. And the external stressors, they could be, things that are going on at school, things that are going on at work, things that are going on within the family. Or internal stressors can be, our feelings about something or our thoughts about something that's happened. So let's look at some different types of stress here. So there's eustress and distress. So with eustress, it's a type of stress that results from challenging but attainable and enjoyable tasks. So for example, starting a new job, that let's normalize that. There could be some stress with that, and that's okay, right? Because that's a stress that we want to have. We want this new job opportunity, or planning for a social event. Maybe you're planning for an anniversary, or a wedding or some event coming up in your family. We want to normalize that there will be some stress there, but that stress can help us. It can help push us forward to achieving or planning that event or going to that new job. And it's normal to experience some stress around that. But what is distress? So distress is a type of stress that results from being overwhelmed by your stress. It's like I have too many stressors, or this particular stressor just feels so heavy to me, so I'm in distress. And examples of that can be academic pressures. For example, working with lots of students who say, I feel like I'm getting too many assignments and I'm having trouble just managing, all of these assignments. I'm not getting the things done that I have to do for school. So that's causing me even more stress. Also, financial pressures. We are experiencing some inflation right now. And so just being able to balance everything, thinking about what you have to buy and budgeting, peer pressure, family responsibilities, and also societal expectations can cause distress. How is stress affecting parents? Are the parents okay? So I found this really interesting that the United States Surgeon General in 2024, Dr. Vivek Murthy, has declared that raising children in America is causing an unsafe level of stress in parents. And he derived that from this 2023 study from the American Psychological Association, which showed that 48% of parents say that most days their stress is completely overwhelming. So many demands that almost half of parents are saying that it's completely overwhelming. I can't manage it. So parents are also struggling with loneliness. That came out of that study. And so some things that can help parents right now is to attend to their mental health, slowing down, thinking about what am I experiencing? What am I feeling? What supports do I need to reach out to reestablish my mental health, to lower my stress? Very important, because before the pandemic, actually, people, had a lot of supports in place. And during the pandemic, people definitely tried to build those supports in place. I remember in my family, we had a Kwanzaa festival on Zoom, which was fantastic. However, just seeing people face to face now, it's become a production. It's an endeavor to do that. And so we have to really reestablish those supports. And it can still be a virtual group. If that's what you can get to in terms of having a support of a virtual group, that can work for many people. All right. So let's go to the mental health crisis. Are the kids okay? And so Politico surveyed 1,400 clinicians in 2024 and identified many reasons behind the national mental health crisis of youth. And so let's talk about some of those reasons. And I experienced these firsthand, as a frontline worker, a therapist, all throughout the pandemic, seeing these things. And so I know this from experience as being a mental health professional, and also I was directing other therapists. And so just receiving information from them. And so some of the underlying reasons are a complete lack of mental health resources, folks. So we don't have enough therapists. We don't have enough psychologists. We don't have enough psychiatrists and psychiatric medication prescribers. That's a fact. In many states, that just has not been established where we didn't have it before in many cases. And this youth mental health crisis started 10 years before the pandemic. So there already were a lack of mental health resources before the pandemic. And so the pandemic brought a new set of challenges on top of this lack of mental health resources. And we're seeing that. We're seeing so many events that are happening in our nation that show us that there is a lack of mental health resources. Something else, a shortage of mental health providers that can treat children. So all mental health providers don't treat children. Some prefer to only treat adults or teens, not children. And so we need more mental health providers. We need ways to get people interested in becoming mental health providers. So we have mental health providers to treat children. Wait lists to see a therapist, and I've heard this so often, can be 6 to 12 months long. I am a therapist in private practice, and I have seen this where my practice filled up pretty quickly. And I'm trying to help, trying to provide, more resources and, provide more therapist resources for people. But it's definitely a challenge, folks. Many schools don't have guidance counselors, unfortunately. Or I've seen many cases where the guidance counselor might be in charge of too many students, like a guidance counselor in charge of 300 students or 400, 500. How are you really going to know all those students? That can be very difficult. And so on the school level, that has to change. Many rural areas have little to no mental health resources. So lots of rural areas where you won't be able to find a psychiatrist, or the wait list for mental health providers might be 6 months. We see that often. Also social media, children and teens and also parents spending a lot of time on social media, engaging in this culture of comparisons, comparing my life to someone's life on social media, which we know can be very misleading, right? Because we are only seeing the picture with the smile and whatever background, if the background is real, and the things that that person is showing. We don't know that person's emotions behind that picture. Also, social isolation. And this continues on. Again, a lot of groups and resources have not been reestablished for children and teens and also parents. And so a lot of people are experiencing loneliness, going home to, a home of one, not having that access to family, or friends anymore. Also, events outside of teenagers' control and parents' control, like school shootings, political instability, war, climate change. None of those things we can control. We'd like to control those things, and hopefully laws will be in place to control some of these things. But for now, a lot of that is outside of our control. So there's anxiety there, right? There's depression there, worrying about things I can't control. So let's talk about social media, the impact of social media on stress and anxiety, because I get this a lot from parents asking me, how can I navigate social media with my child or with my teenager? And I have this question here, why can't my life be happy like other people on YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok? All of these social media platforms that we're using. So there was a study of US adolescents aged 12 to 15 that adjusted for baseline mental health status, which found that adolescents who spent more than 3 hours per day on social media face double the risk of experiencing poor mental health outcomes, including symptoms of depression and anxiety. And this is really interesting because on our phones or our watches now, we can track how much time we're spending on social media and also how much time we're spending on the phone or using the phone. And so I would definitely want to encourage parents to look at that, to track your time. How much time are you using on your phone? You know, track your teen's time or your child's time. How much time? Let's think about that. 3 hours per day. So that's 21 hours in a week. Think about what you could do with 21 extra hours, or even half of that, right? All of that time. What could you do with that time? Thinking about where I want to invest my time. Do I want to invest my time on social media for over 20 hours a week? Or do I want to, or on my phone doing something else, or do I want to invest my time in something that can be really enriching? In June 2024, the United States Surgeon General called for a warning label on social media due to social media use among teens being associated with mental health harm. And so, just like there were warning labels placed on products like cigarettes, the Surgeon General is calling for a warning label, to be placed on social media platforms so parents are aware of how this will affect their teens, how this will affect their mental health. Very necessary. Parents just don't have enough information to put safety standards in place. It feels like a guessing game around the social media. How much time, should my teenager spend on social media? How much time should my teenager spend on their phone? I get that question quite often. And so it's really necessary to have some limits around that. 4.8 hours is the average time that teens spend on social media. My goodness, that's a lot of time. That is a whole part-time job when you count up all those hours, or something else really productive. So again, thinking about how much time am I spending on social media, because as parents are modeling the cell phone use. If I'm on my phone also 4 hours, what am I showing my teen or my child? Here's some coping skills. So I know many of you all are here because you want to know, well, what can I do to manage my anxiety? What can I do to manage my stress? And we're going to talk about several ways to do that. So first, to identify things that are within your control and make a plan to manage those things. So many things are outside of our control, right? Things that just are not going to be resolved by us. But there's so many things that we can control. Like, for example, I just mentioned the social media use. I'm going to plan how much time I want to spend on social media in a week. Have that plan in place for myself as a parent and also for my child. Also having tech-free zones. So turning in the phone at night, having your teenager or your child turn that phone into you at night in a special place where it's kept, where they don't have access to it. No phone use at mealtime. So when we come to the table, we can, leave our phones behind. Or maybe if you have to have the phone there for some type of alert that's coming in, maybe you just place that phone face down. So it becomes a tech-free zone. Parents can also model social media / phone limits. I've mentioned that a lot because our children are always watching us. How much time are we spending on the phone? How much time are we looking at a TikTok or a YouTube versus having that one-on-one interaction with our child? We also want to talk about online harassment like cyberbullying because that's definitely happened. People make comments under many social media posts, and we want to talk about the impact of that and when to seek help if your child or your teen is being cyberbullied. Also, changing your intake of caffeine, which can provoke anxiety in the body, alcohol, tobacco, and sweeteners. So I call them cats. So thinking about, how much caffeine am I drinking, especially with things like these monster type of drinks, which have a ton of caffeine in them. Or these energy drinks, which look at the back of it, it shows it has a ton of sugar in it and a ton of caffeine. We want to stay away from those types of drinks, especially if we are already experiencing anxiety. We don't want to add to the anxiety that we're already experiencing. Also, parents can share appropriate stories of how they're managing stressful situations. I work with a lot of teens who say their parents just say, well, don't worry about it. They come to them with some concern. Don't worry. Well, I hear from those teens that's not really helping. And what they would like to hear is stories. Or if their parent can bring up an appropriate story, I should say, of when they had to manage some type of stressors. And so that teenager or that child can think when they encounter stress, okay, well, mom, did this to manage her stress, or dad reached out to this person. Maybe I can do the same thing, reach out to someone. Other coping skills to manage anxiety and stress are seeking out study skills, tutoring, and coaching. There is a great site called thesecrettowriting.com, and they provide study skills classes, they provide tutoring, academic coaching. It's just wonderful. I've seen them at work and I know they do a great job. And so I definitely want to mention that resource. It's a great thing if your child comes to you and says, I think I'm going to need some tutoring. I think I need some study skills. Many children get study skills maybe in the 6th grade, starting out, making that transition from elementary school to middle school. After 6th grade, a lot of times those study skills aren't mentioned again. It's not something that every school year we go back to study skills, but it's a necessary topic to go back to study skills and having structure and having a routine. It's a necessary skill to have. And so getting those skills, looking for resources like thesecrettowriting.com, which has multiple resources on those study skills, getting tutoring for your child. Many libraries nowadays provide even free tutoring for kids. Asking yourself, what kind of advice would you give a friend with a similar problem in terms of the anxiety and stress that you're experiencing? A lot of times I'll ask that question to get people to step outside of themselves and think about, okay, well, what would I say to someone else that was going through this stressful situation? What would I tell this person? And many times people can come up with a very compassionate response, a plan, very methodical. And so taking that advice that you would give to a friend and using that advice for yourself. Also prioritizing and setting goals. and setting small rewards when you achieve those goals. So, starting out the beginning of the semester with some goals that you want for yourself, and then, as a parent, talking about those goals with your child, revisiting those goals every week until you see your child or your teen take those goals and run. They're managing those goals themselves, but they definitely are going to need that weekly interaction, that weekly, how are things going with your goals? What do we need to change with your goals? Are these goals specific? Are they measurable? Are they achievable? Are they results oriented? Are they time bound? Asking those questions. Also, some deep breathing methods. So, one of my favorite deep breathing methods is the 4-4-4 breathing. And so, I'm going to show that. And so, for the 4-4-4 breathing, what we would do is we would inhale for 4 seconds, and then we would hold that breath for 4 seconds, and then we would exhale for 4 seconds. So I'll show that. So I'm going to inhale for 4 seconds through my nose for diaphragmatic breathing. So here I go. Inhaling for 4 seconds, and you can do it with me, anyone that's here on the presentation. So let's breathe in for 4 seconds through our nose. Let's hold it for 4 seconds. And now let's exhale, blowing it out slowly for 4 seconds. Yes, that can be very relaxing. And that's something we can do when we're feeling stress or anxiety. That deep breathing, it's been shown, it's been proven to be very helpful with anxiety. Also, candle/flower breathing. I love this one. I do this often with adults and children. And so it's very simple. So it is smell the flowers, blow out the candles. And so we would do that by taking a deep breath, and we'll hold our hands out and we'll do that. So we're going to smell the flowers. So holding our hands like this and smelling the flowers, taking a deep breath, and then blowing out the candles slowly. Let's do that again. Let's take that deep breath in and smell the flowers. And then blowing out the candles, blowing out that breath slowly. Excellent. Another technique that I like to share is the stop method. And so the stop method is S, to stop with what you're doing when you're feeling emotionally overwhelmed. So let's say you're feeling a lot of anxiety, very nervous. Stop what you're doing in that moment. And I really mean stop what you're doing. Stop what you're doing in that moment. Take a deep breath. Just taking a moment for yourself to take that breath. Observe. Ask yourself, okay, what is going on in this situation right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's going on in my environment right now? And then after I do that, I can proceed mindfully. Now I can think about, how can I be present in this moment? How can I do something that's going to be helpful to me in this next moment versus doing something that's going to be unhelpful or contribute to my anxiety? Also, keeping a routine of healthy eating. So, eating whole foods, limiting time on social media. We've talked about that. Exercising at least 150 minutes weekly. Utilizing your social support, so your family, your community, attending festivals, meeting people, virtual events, planning fun activities for yourself. We don't want to be in a situation where it's just going to school and then going home, going to work and then going home every day, like this monotony. We want to break this up. We want to have some activities that we look forward to every week, planning things with other people. When is it time to seek help? my teen or child is asking to see a counselor, I also think I want to see a counselor. I hear this often. And so if your child or your teenager is asking to see a counselor, that is fantastic because I've seen more situations where teens and children are not, seeking counseling, not thinking about that as a resource. And so if they have found other people in their circle that are seeing a therapist or maybe even a psychiatrist if medication is necessary, then it could be a good thing, for your child to get an evaluation by a mental health counselor or a psychiatrist if necessary so that they can get that extra help. That is a strength, folks, for anyone to see a therapist. I am a huge mental health advocate. I think therapy can change people's lives in a very positive way. So, what are some signs that extra help is needed? So, if the anxiety is causing impairment with your daily life, maybe your teen or your child is saying, "Well, I don't want to go to school anymore." Well, that's an alert there. Something is happening. So, we want to get that teen or that child some help. If you yourself are not wanting to go to work, not wanting to complete your work activities, because your stress and anxiety is causing impairment. Well, it could be that it's overwhelming for you now, and it could be a great time to seek some help. Or if that child or teen or even a parent is shying away from social situations, getting invitations and no longer going to family events, or getting out and doing things, that is definitely an alert. Physical symptoms like chest pains, like heart palpitations, headaches, chronic fatigue are associated with anxiety, and that can definitely signify some extra help being needed for sure, especially if that is coming often and you're feeling that is overwhelming. I've seen many cases with anxiety where people start to feel this chest pain and they think they may be having a heart attack, and then they call the ER or they call the ambulance, excuse me, and then the ambulance takes them to the ER, and they go to the ER, and sometimes they find out that that chest pain that they thought was a heart attack or heart problem is actually anxiety. And then they get a referral to a therapist. That happens so often. And so when things like that are happening, yeah, it's time to get that extra help. It's time to seek more support. It's time to get an evaluation. Also, if you're seeing a withdrawal from friends, family, and social situations, just don't want to go anymore. Don't want to be around people because I'm feeling so much anxiety. That is a sign that extra help is needed. Also, panic attacks. These panic attacks where you feel like you cannot control the anxiety, it becomes so overwhelming. It's starting to become unmanageable. And so, going to therapy to learn ways to manage your thoughts, and also change your routine so it's a healthier routine. Also, there could be trauma there, right? That's behind these panic attacks that you're happening. So being able to talk about past trauma is necessary, process that, and receive tools to help manage that trauma. Where can you seek help? Well, Theralum, of course, I'm going to say that I'm the co-founder, right? Also, community mental health agencies. I worked with a community mental health agency for many years. Also was the interim director at a community mental health agency in their behavioral health department. So I'm always going to promote community health agencies. The beautiful thing about them is that they provide access to care for people that have Medicaid and Medicare, and people that have lower incomes. And so they provide a great resource. They're all across our nation. Our tax dollars pay for these community mental health agencies. And so we want to support them. Also, you can find a therapist on Psychology Today. There are many therapists that are on that site. I'm also affiliated with that site. Also, Therapy for Black Men. I'm also affiliated with that site. Great therapists on that site if you're looking for a therapist for yourself in many states across the U.S. Theralum. So here's the information for Theralum. Again, the company that I helped co-found. Here's our website, theralum.com. And of course, we have all of the great things on social media to go along with that website. We have an Instagram page, Twitter, also Facebook. And here's our telephone number here. And I'll show that if anyone wants to take a picture, or you could also reach back out to me for sure. And now here's our question and answer period. So if anyone has any questions, I'm ready to receive those questions.
Well, Janine, that was just kind of amazing, I might say. I had quite frankly, a series of questions that I received that I personally had, and I also received questions from the audience. But you, in this period of time, you really covered, like you almost answered like all my questions. I mean, what is anxiety? What is stress? And how do you really cope with these things?
Mm-hmm.
Still, I do have a couple of I do have a couple other questions. And then one quick thing, if you wouldn't mind, Janine, not sharing if you take off the where you're not sharing your screen, that way the audience will have a bigger view.
Sure.
All right, super. So, a lot of the work that we do at The Secret to Writing is geared around helping students plan for college and helping students write college admissions essays and just taking writing classes and so on. So along with that, I know from personal experience and then just the work I do with families that can be really stressful. Students feel compelled to take what seems like a gazillion AP classes, or they test and retest or standardize exams. They try to be involved in almost every extracurricular there is. And while on the one hand, that could be, it's positive, but it can also be a lot, and it can be stress and anxiety inducing. What are your thoughts? What is your advice to help families with managing this?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I've seen that quite often, especially when it comes to the AP classes. And so I would say that you want to talk with your child about their expectations and talk about your expectations also. They may expect to do multiple activities. However, we want to talk about what's realistic and manageable for that child, because we also want that child to be having fun. If there's no room for fun and attending family activities, then it could cause them a lot of stress. And so really looking at those expectations, and also not having teens or children feel like it's an all or nothing scenario. Like, if I don't participate in these activities or take these classes, then I won't get into the college that I want to go to. That's not true at all. There could be other things that child is doing, that teen is doing, that also helps them get into college, right? And so definitely sitting down and talking with your child about their expectations and your expectations. And again, is that manageable? Is that really realistic and manageable? And if so, how is that going to be manageable? Let's make a plan around that. Let's talk about the details of that. How are we going to make this happen? All of these things that you want to do, let's put this on a schedule. Let's see what this really is going to look like for you.
That's excellent. And, you know, I just from, again, sort of personal experience, I've found that it's one thing to talk about things, but when you sort of sit down and you put pen to paper and you map it out, it really can demystify whatever the task might be.
Mhm.
I also want to like say thank you even for the plug about the Secret to Writing and our study skills tutoring and classes. I know that there is a lot of stress that both students and parents feel when it comes to managing schoolwork, homework
Mhm.
assignments, tests, and so on. And so there are issues as it relates to organization, time management, and so on. Can you, I'm just going to pick one. I mean, we could have a whole nother session on this very topic, but well, the one issue that a number of parents identified is related to time management. So my question is, can you offer any recommendations on how parents can help their student with time management?
Yes, I would definitely say that parents can sit down at the beginning of the school year or any time during the school year, as a matter of fact, and set goals. Let's set some goals around school. And not only set these goals, let's then set some concrete steps around achieving these goals. And so I want to earn a certain grade or percentage in a class. Okay, so what are the steps? What is it going to take to achieve that? What are some concrete things that that child can do? And also, as a parent, offering your help. You know, how can I help you with those goals? What can I do to help you and facilitate that? And then also accountability. So unfortunately, a lot of times I'll see that first thing to set those goals and come up with those steps, but then we have to have that follow through. So that week by week, following up, okay, how did you do with those steps that you said that you're going to take? Let's check in. Let's find out how you're doing. So that parent can really serve as an accountability partner with that teen or with that child to make sure that they have all the help and support they need to get that goal that they've agreed to achieved. And so that's really important. Also, we want to provide positive feedback to teens and children when we see them taking these steps. Like, oh, that's great. Like coaching. Oh, that's excellent. So not just seeing them complete the steps and not saying anything, you know, not acknowledging or recognizing their efforts. We definitely want to do that weekly. And so we want to do those weekly check-ins as a parent with our teen or our child. So then at some point, hopefully, they take it on themselves. They're like, you know, I'm good, mom. I'm good, dad. I've got it. That's like music to your ears, right? I've got this. I'm doing this now. I don't need your help anymore. We want to hear that. However, to get there, we have to start out with accountability and those weekly check-ins. That's very necessary. Yeah.
Okay, gosh, you know, we're just about out of time. Um, but this doesn't have to be the end of the conversation, so to speak. One thing, and Janine, please correct me, but I know that I've heard you speak live, and you're absolutely fantastic in a webinar. But my goodness, in person, it's you know I feel like you're off the charts. So to our audience members, Janine and her with her affiliation with Theralum, she does, correct me if I'm wrong, go out and provide presentations in communities, whether it's at a school or a community center or a religious institution or a corporation, doing lunch and learns. These are all places where you frequent to provide this type of presentation. Am I correct?
You are very correct. I'm very open to doing that. You can contact me at theralum.com by sending a message. Also, you'll find our contact information in terms of our telephone number there on our site. And so I'm absolutely open to coming out to do trainings, also lunch and learns, as you mentioned, presentations. Absolutely, I would love to do that. I feel like that is, goes along with, all the service that I've done. As a mental health therapist, I love to serve, my community.
Well, thank you very much, Janine. And really, again, we're just about out of time. That sounds terrific. Let me just say this on behalf of the secrettowriting.com. I want to thank you, Janine, for taking the time to be with us today, to share your experience, your insights with our audience. It's been the information, you shared a lot. It was a lot to take in, but it was really on point, very powerful, and I'm personally very appreciative of it, and I trust that our audience is appreciative as well. And now, and to speak directly to our audience, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us today for this presentation. I invite you to come back to thesecrettowriting.com for our Expanding College Opportunity Speaker Series. You can go to our website and look under the Expanding College Opportunity Speaker Series tab, and there you will find a list of upcoming events. So to everyone, I wish you well, and stay healthy, stay safe, and again, thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.